The idea that a struggling marriage can only be saved by sitting on a therapist's couch at $200 an hour is a completely manufactured myth that leaves thousands of couples feeling entirely helpless. When your relationship is hitting a wall and your bank account is empty, believing that healing is locked behind a financial paywall can cause you to completely give up on each other out of sheer despair. The truth is that the structural changes that actually save a partnership don't happen during a weekly 50-minute session anyway. They happen in the tiny, unglamorous choices you make in your own living room on a Tuesday night. If you don't learn how to become your own relationship mechanics right now, you risk letting a lack of money turn into a lack of hope, watching a salvageable love slip away simply because you couldn't afford the professional guide. There are very specific, entirely free shifts you can implement together starting today that can completely rewrite your dynamic, and you need to see exactly how they work before you assume your marriage is too broken to fix. The first practical pillar of repairing a marriage on your own is implementing what people casually refer to as a communication reset. In a long-term relationship that has gone off the rails, conversations almost always become a predictable trap where both people are constantly defensive, interrupting each other, and listening only to prepare their next counterattack. Psychologically, this happens because your nervous systems have become conditioned to view your partner as an emotional threat, causing you to instantly drop into a fight-or-flight response the second a difficult topic is raised. To fix this without a therapist in the room to play referee, you have to establish a strict, self-enforced structure that physically prevents you from talking over each other and forces you to slow down your reactions. You have to move away from chaotic, late-night arguments and transition into a structured, scheduled format where each person gets uninterrupted time to speak while the other is required to simply mirror back what they heard before offering a response. To understand how simple and transformative this structural shift can be, think about what happened with a couple named Mark and Sarah, who found themselves locked in a toxic loop of screaming matches over their mounting household debt. Because they couldn't afford counseling, they decided to try a rule where they would sit down every Sunday morning at the kitchen table with a physical kitchen timer set for exactly 5 minutes. Mark was allowed to speak about his financial anxieties for those 5 minutes without Sarah making a single face, sighing, or interrupting him once. When the timer buzzed, Sarah had to state clearly what she heard him say, and only then could she reset the timer for her own 5 minutes to share her side of the story. Within a single month, this basic, free exercise completely stopped their explosive shouting matches because it broke their automatic habit of immediate defensiveness and gave them both the rare safety of actually being heard. When you strip away the fancy vocabulary, this works because structure provides an artificial safety net that your raw emotions cannot currently support on their own. When a relationship is fragile, you cannot rely on spontaneous, late-night chats to go well because you are both too exhausted and too loaded with past resentment to stay calm. By setting a specific time, using an actual clock, and forcing yourselves to repeat back your partner's words, you are manually overriding your brain's defensive wiring. It forces you to operate from your logical mind rather than your wounded ego, allowing you to unpack deeply painful issues without letting them devolve into a relationship-ending storm. You don't need a degree or a license to look at your spouse and agree to a set of basic conversational rules. You just need the shared discipline to stick to them when your feelings are telling you to yell. This deliberate containment is the exact foundation you need before you can begin to tackle the deeper issues in your home. This leads us to a second crucial strategy that costs absolutely nothing, which is consciously dismantling the pattern people call the silent scorekeeper. In marriages that are quietly dying under the weight of financial stress, partners often stop talking about their hurt and instead begin silently tracking every single mistake, oversight, and perceived slight committed by the other person. From a psychological perspective, this is a form of emotional hoarding where you gather evidence of your partner's bad behavior to justify your own growing coldness, withdrawal, or resentment. You feel like you are being the bigger person by not starting a fight over a missed chore or an insensitive comment, but you are actually allowing those unvoiced grievances to turn into a thick poison that ruins your view of your spouse. You start looking at them through a permanent lens of disappointment, and eventually, the weight of that unvoiced ledger becomes too heavy for the relationship to carry. Consider a husband named David and his wife Elena, who had drifted into a completely icy distance after David lost his business, and they had to downsize their apartment. Elena was quietly furious that David spent his afternoons watching television instead of actively applying for jobs, but she said nothing because she didn't want to cause more stress in the house. Instead, She began keeping a mental tally of every single thing he did wrong, from leaving his shoes by the door to forgetting to turn off the kitchen light, using each small annoyance to confirm her belief that he was lazy and checked out. David felt her icy disapproval but had no idea where it was coming from, so he withdrew even further into his phone, which only added another mark to Elena's internal scoreboard. By the time they finally had an argument, it wasn't a healthy discussion about employment. It was a terrifying avalanche of 6 months of accumulated, unvoiced bitterness that left David completely blindsided and Elena completely exhausted. To break this devastating cycle without a professional intervention, you have to implement a strict 24-hour expiration date rule for your daily resentments. If something happens that hurts your feelings, makes you angry, or feels unfair, you have exactly 24 hours to bring it to your partner's attention in a calm, constructive manner, or you must consciously choose to let it go completely. This prevents you from building a historical warehouse of ammunition that you can weaponize during a future disagreement, forcing you instead to deal with your problems in manageable, real-time pieces. It requires you to trade the passive-aggressive comfort of silent judgment for the courageous vulnerability of immediate, honest communication. When you commit to keeping your emotional ledger entirely clear at the end of every single day, you prevent the slow, toxic buildup of resentment that does far more damage to a marriage than any single argument ever could. The third free pillar of rebuilding your marriage on a budget is reversing a pattern that people in long-term relationships often call the emotional drift. When you are constantly stressed about money, work, or chores, it is incredibly easy to let your interactions become entirely transactional, focusing only on who is buying the groceries, who is picking up the kids, or how the bills are getting paid. Psychologically, this happens because your brain prioritizes immediate survival tasks over emotional connection when resources feel scarce, causing you to treat your spouse more like a business partner than a romantic lover. You stop looking each other in the eye, you stop asking how the other person is actually doing inside, and you gradually allow your deep emotional bond to be replaced by a sterile co-parenting or co-living routine. You think you are just going through a busy season, but you are accidentally letting the core intimacy of your partnership completely starve to death from lack of attention. To see how this quiet distance takes over a household, look at what happened with a couple named Marcus and Chloe, who were drowning in student loan debt and working opposite shifts just to keep up with their rent. They prided themselves on being an incredibly organized team, managing their calendar and their budget with absolute military precision through text messages and shared spreadsheets. However, they realized they hadn't had a single conversation that didn't involve logistics, finances, or scheduling in over 8 months, and they had completely stopped touching each other unless it was a casual goodbye hug. One night, Marcus looked across the couch at Chloe and realized he felt more connected to his coworkers than to the woman he had promised to spend his life with, simply because his interactions with her had become entirely devoid of warmth, curiosity, or playfulness. They had successfully managed their household, but they had allowed their emotional relationship to become completely hollowed out by the daily grind. To reverse this drift without a therapist's intervention, you have to implement a daily ritual called the 10-minute non-transactional check-in. Every single day, you and your partner must sit down for 10 uninterrupted minutes and have a conversation where you are strictly forbidden from talking about money, work, chores, scheduling, or the kids. You can talk about your internal thoughts, a podcast you listen to, a memory from your past, or your abstract hopes for the future. Anything that re-engages your curiosity about each other as individual human beings. This tiny, cost-free habit forces your brain to step out of survival mode and actively reconstructs the bridge of intimacy that the daily grind constantly tries to tear down. It requires zero financial investment, but it demands an intentional decision to prioritize the soul of your relationship over its logistics, ensuring that you remain deeply known to each other as you navigate the hardships of life together. The fourth and final strategy for saving your marriage on your own is consciously confronting the cycle that people commonly refer to as the blame game. When a relationship is under immense pressure and you can't afford professional help to sort through the chaos, it is incredibly easy to fall into a default mindset where you believe that if your partner would just fix their flaws, everything would be completely fine. From a psychological standpoint, this is a subconscious defense mechanism where your mind projects all the discomfort and failure of the relationship onto your spouse so you don't have to face your own contributions to the mess. You become hyper-focused on their anger, their withdrawal, or their thoughtlessness, completely ignoring how your own defensiveness, criticism, or coldness is actively triggering their worst behavior. This creates a highly toxic, circular loop where both people are waiting for the other to change first, leaving the entire marriage completely paralyzed in a state of mutual resentment. Consider a wife named Jessica and her husband Tom, who were constantly fighting about their total lack of physical and emotional intimacy after years of financial strain. Jessica was entirely convinced that the problem was Tom's fault because he would come home from work, sit in complete silence on his phone, and completely ignore her attempts to connect. Tom, on the other hand, was entirely convinced that the problem was Jessica's fault because the very first thing she did when he walked through the door was criticize his posture, his income, or his lack of help around the house. They were locked in a perfect circle. Jessica criticized because Tom withdrew, and Tom withdrew because Jessica criticized, yet both of them were completely blind to their own role in the dance. Because they couldn't afford a counselor to point this out, they spent 2 years pointing fingers, completely stuck in place because neither person was willing to drop their weapons first. Breaking this exhausting gridlock for free requires you to make a radical shift from focusing on your partner's behavior to taking absolute, radical ownership of your own percentage of the dynamic. You have to sit down together and ask a single, highly courageous question. What am I doing that makes it hard for you to be close to me right now? This single shift completely changes the energy in the room because it replaces the threat of judgment with the safety of mutual accountability, allowing both of you to drop your defenses at the exact same time. You don't need a professional to tell you how you are hurting your spouse. If you are completely honest with yourself, you already know exactly where you are falling short in terms of patience, kindness, or effort. When you stop demanding that your partner change first and instead focus entirely on cleaning up your own side of the street, you naturally disrupt the toxic loop and create the space for a completely new, loving dynamic to take root. When you look at all of these shifts together, it becomes beautifully clear that saving a marriage isn't about the money you spend on a professional counselor, but about the shared discipline, vulnerability, and intentional daily effort you choose to invest in each other right inside your own home. If you look honestly at the current state of your partnership, do you feel like you've been waiting for an outside expert to fix the damage? Or are you ready to sit down with your spouse and implement these free structures today? Subscribe to the channel. I break down a new psychological pattern in human behavior and relationships every single day. See you in the next video.